Hello, listeners and fellow explorers. This is Living in the Sprawl's lovely and talented producer/fiance, Lisa Lowe. I wanted to thank all of you for your constant support of the show. As a new podcast on the scene, the number one way to support the show is to rate, review, and share this podcast with everyone you know. Many of you have been doing this, and it has helped immensely. You can also check out our website and the show notes for other ways to support the show. We have new merch on our website, and we are working with companies that we currently use ourselves to get discount codes for our listeners and support the research and work we do for the show in the process. These companies include Every Table Meal Delivery Service, which offers delicious, cost-effective meals delivered straight to your door. Just CBD Store, which offers great tasting CBD-only gummies in a variety of flavors, and Miss to Mrs. boxes for brides-to-be. My sister Jennifer surprised me with this box when I got engaged, and it was the most perfect, thoughtful gift. You can also support us on Patreon and Podfan. Please check out the website at livinginthesprawlpodcast.com for updates on companies we are working with, our testimonies, links, codes, and new Living in the Sprawl merchandise. Again, thank you to all of you, our lovely listeners, for tuning in every week and allowing us to do what we love. Without further ado, your humble correspondent, Jon Steinberg.
Hello, and welcome to another installment of Living in the Sprawl, Southern California's most adventurous podcast. I am your humble correspondent and host. My name is Jon Steinberg. Sitting alongside me, as always, is my lovely and extraordinarily talented producer/fiance. Her name is Lisa Lowe, and we are gathered here today to bring you yet another exciting entree into the sprawl, another way to connect to Southern California, even though it seems so massive and impenetrable. We're here to provide you with ways to strategize exactly how to interact with that monstrosity we affectionately call the sprawl. Now, we all know that Southern California contains Los Angeles, and within Los Angeles, you've got the entertainment industry. So, it occurred to me quite recently to do an episode where we pair a couple obsessions that this podcast has espoused during our run so far: true crime and filmmaking. So, here we are with a list of the 10 most fascinating films that were based off actual true crimes. Lots to choose from. Quite a number of worthy applicants. Slid just below 10. If I had it to do again, I could have made this 1 through 50. There have been a lot of crimes set in Southern California, and even more motion pictures set to capture them. But let us begin our countdown of the 10 most fascinating films based off actual true crimes from Southern California. Beginning the list at number 10, Indictment, the McMartin Trial. This made-for-television film, it was shot for HBO in the mid-90s, directed by none other than Mick Jackson, who actually went on to direct trying to figure out the right word to say, volcano exploitation film titled, surprise, surprise, Volcano. But before Volcano and lava spiraling out on Wilshire Boulevard, he helmed this tale of a tragic case that ripped the heart out of the South Bay community. In the early 80s, a preschool in Manhattan Beach run by the McMartin family became embroiled in scandal when students came forward claiming that they'd been sexually assaulted by teachers and staff members at the preschool. it would be a long, costly, and emotionally taxing case for those residing in Los Angeles. But the case also merited inclusion on national news coverage outlets like CNN and ABC. Ultimately, the McMartin case was to be the longest and costliest case in California state history. Ultimately, all of the indicted parties, meaning the instructors and teachers at the school who'd been accused of unspeakable crimes against children, they were all released. And this movie does a really great job of handling such delicate subject matter. James Woods portrays the lead defense attorney tasked with getting jurors to see his clients as human beings rather than satanic, evil monsters that some of the stories coached out of the young children would have led them to believe. Woods is in rare form, delivering a spellbinding performance. On the other side of the coin, Mercedes Ruehl is just as capable, playing the part of someone who absolutely believes the accusations against the Bucky family and the McMartin family. This is what you might call a courtroom boiler. Lots of scenes set inside a courthouse, arguments from the defense side of the spectrum to the prosecution, and ultimately we do arrive at a just verdict, the one I alluded to earlier, where these horribly treated former members of education are vindicated and allowed to go free. So I wanted to begin the list with a kind of made-for-television movie. There are hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands, that could have merited inclusion on a list like this. But this is an actual movie that could have played in theaters and competed for Academy Awards. It's definitely on the higher end of the HBO made-for-TV spectrum. So, at number 10, in its examination of the goings-on with the McMartin Preschool, we start our list here at number 10 with Indictment, the McMartin Trial. At number 9, The Bling Ring, directed by none other than one of my favorite directors, Sofia Coppola. From the moment Crown on the Ground blisters to open the film, the Sleigh Bells song sets the tone for the remainder of what's to come. The film chronicles actions of the supposed quote-unquote Bling Ring, which are a group of teenagers residing in Calabasas who got the super bright idea, and I'm using super bright in quotes, to invade the homes of stars that they admired or celebrities that maybe they didn't even admire, amassing a $3 million treasure trove in stolen goods. They raided homes of people like Paris Hilton, Audrina from the Hills in Laguna Beach, Orlando Bloom, Lindsay Lohan, Brian Austin Green and Megan Fox. And it was when they began really bragging about their exploits, wearing some of the designer clothing that they had stolen from the likes of Rachel Bilson. They were wearing this stuff to high school. And of course, their high school friends, colleagues, would go, "Oh my God, where did you get that? Blah, blah, blah." And stupidly, they would say, "Well, we got it from Rachel Bilson's house." "Really? She gave it to you?" "No, we broke in and we took it." And this scheme lasted for over a year. They figured out which celebrities would be out of town by virtue of social media postings. And it's not as difficult to obtain an address for someone famous as you might assume. It seemed initially like a bit of a strange topic for the likes of Sofia Coppola to tackle. Lost in Translation and The Virgin Suicides are, in my opinion, two of the best American movies made within the last 50 years. So when I heard that she'd be turning her attention to a project like this, it did strike me as a bit of a surprise until I remembered that Sofia Coppola, in addition to being the daughter of Francis and part of the large and well-ensconced Hollywood elite family, the Coppolas, that she was also married first to Spike Jonze, iconic director, and then to the lead singer of the band Phoenix. So some of these issues of personal privacy in the era of oversharing on social media, friends of Sofia's had their homes burglarized by members of the Bling Ring, and there were a lot of elements of the story that managed to hit close to home. Emma Watson is cast as kind of the ultimate embodiment of all the wrong things we ascribe to a certain time and period in American history. The super obsessed with reality television, intent on becoming a celebrity despite the fact that she doesn't have a great deal of talent in any particular field. The Emma Watson character, whose name is Nikki in the film, and is actually based off of a woman named Alexis Mears, embodies the super privileged, Calabasas living, Hollywood aspiring, no talent young woman. All of the songs in the movie are lifted from the era. So when we hear All of the Lights by Kanye West or Moment for Life by Nicki Minaj, it's all meant to paint a picture of what was happening in 2008 when these crimes occurred. The movie clocks in at a brisk hour and a half and manages to use some of the actual homes where, like for instance, where Paris Hilton lived, cameras actually shot some of the scenes at the homes which were burglarized by the Bling Ring. An interesting, if a bit depressing, time capsule of what it was like to be a pop culture obsessed American teenager in the year of our Lord 2008. Sofia Coppola's The Bling Ring. At number 8, Hollywoodland, starring Adrian, Brody, Ben Affleck, Diane Lane, and a menacing Bob Hoskins, far, far removed from his turn on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The film explores the suspicious suicide of George Reeves, played by Affleck in the film, the star of The Adventures of Superman, who, as the official story would have us believe, shot himself in his bedroom on the second floor of his Benedict Canyon mansion. Distraught over the languid way in which his career was proceeding, angered by an industry that he felt never properly utilized his talents. George Reeves had bit roles in Gone with the Wind and From Here to Eternity, but the only thing that ever made him any money was his gig on The Adventures of Superman. And he didn't love this gig, so it would make sense that in a fit of despair, rage, what have you, he would succumb to those feelings of inadequacy, taking his own life. And yet, there were 3 bullets found in the bedroom where Reeves's body was uncovered. So there's quite a bit here in the realm of the suspicious. And this is where the Adrian Brody character comes in. He plays a composite Los Angeles police detective in kind of the homicide division, investigating reports that while Reeves's official cause of death was suicide, there may be more at play. We learn over the course of the film that George Reeves was having an affair with a woman named Toni Mannix, played by Diane Lane. Mannix was a married woman and married to none other than Eddie Mannix, played by Bob Hoskins. Eddie Mannix was the ultimate Hollywood fixer for MGM. If an actress had gotten pregnant and needed an illegal abortion, he'd be the guy to help arrange it. If people were giving productions trouble, he would be the one to silence them. He was a fixer in all ways and all manners. And George Reeves just so happened to be having a long-term affair with his wife. So while investigating the possible murder as opposed to a suicide, Adrian, Brody's detective, comes up with 3 distinct possibilities as to what could have happened. One of them involving the official story that George Reeves just shot himself. Another, that it was an argument between he and a current girlfriend and she shot him. And the third being that it was a hit ordered by Eddie Mannix because he'd been sleeping around with his wife. The movie succeeds on a number of levels. It's an old school noir type picture that we don't often get anymore, in the mold of Robert Altman doing the Philip Marlowe character or Roman Polanski's Chinatown. So it does have that classic vintage Hollywood noir quality to it. And the performances are simply spectacular. Academy Award winner Adrian Brody, he's at his best, playing a conflicted detective who's not sure exactly what happened with Reeves, but wishes to investigate the events further. And he's got his own struggles going on, his own personal demons that he has to overcome. And then Affleck is terrific as George Reeves. The scene in which he first meets Toni Mannix, played by Diane Lane, is truly romantic. And when it's revealed that not only is she a married woman, but who she's actually married to, you know that things are not going to go smoothly for all parties involved. I felt like this was a real underground kind of movie, the type of film that would have made waves had it been released in the 1970s, but since it came out in 2006 and was superhero adjacent, because it did involve Superman to a degree, but it just didn't click with a wider audience, even though its quality is absolutely at the top of the heap. So if you're interested in going back to explore a bit of old Hollywood, a bit of the underbelly of said old Hollywood, and to a time when the Hollywood sign was actually the Hollywoodland sign, then we recommend you check out Hollywoodland. At number 7, I Want to Live, the story of Barbara Graham. Came out in 1957, chronicled the crime that led to the incarceration of Barbara Graham and her subsequent state-sanctioned death in the gas chamber. Susan Hayward won the Academy Award for Best Actress for her portrayal as Barbara Graham. This was directed by Robert Wise. Robert Wise of great stuff like West Side Story, and his talents are on full display here. This is kind of a Dead Man Walking, like the movie Dead Man Walking with Sean Penn and Susan Sarandon, before Dead Man Walking. The movie doesn't reckon with Barbara Graham's guilt very much. It's sort of implicitly stated that she's being railroaded, that her past as a sex worker and some of her time spent in prison for vagrancy and kind of petty crimes, all of that is being pinned against her, while the actual murderers are not squarely on the hot seat. In reality, it was a brutal murder. The crime happened in 1953 in Burbank on West Parkside Drive. The house is still in existence, where an old grandmother who was living alone at the time had her home broken into by 4 individuals and was summarily beaten to death. For the crime, Barbara Graham and her cohorts were held responsible, and after a lengthy trial in which Graham's passed as a survivor of sexual abuse and just all around run of awful, awful luck was presented to the jury. But in the end, the jury found Graham guilty of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to death. In 1957, this movie came out and in many ways existed to create a dialogue about the death penalty. I Want to Live stands firmly on the side opposed to using the death penalty in America. It suggests the punishment to be barbaric and not something that should be embraced by the world's foremost superpower. So, again, rather than dealing with the actual crime for which Barbara Graham is on trial for, the movie focuses on the death penalty. And Susan Hayward gives a hell of a performance as the doomed murderess Barbara Graham. And the actual death scene where the character is finally put into the gas chamber is quite harrowing. For 1957 in particular, it lasts roughly 5 minutes and can be difficult to watch for some weak-stomached audiences. So, if we are going just on the pure basis of, is this a good movie? The answer, without equivocation, is yes. It's a really, really well-done movie. Is it completely accurate? That's probably a conversation for another podcast, and not one that we need to get to here on Living in the Sprawl. So, in our list of the 10 best examples of movies based off real-life true crimes, we had to include the classic I Want to Live, the story of Barbara Graham, at number 7. And number 6, The Onion Field. This came out in the year of our Lord 1979, directed by Harold Becker, starring James Woods in a role which helped him obtain a nomination at the Golden Globes for Best Supporting Actor. This was also the first time audiences ever saw Ted Danson on screen. John Savage is also in the movie. And it tells the horrific true story of a pair of policemen who, while out patrolling in the Hollywood area one night in 1963, pulled over a car with 2 gentlemen, and rather than an ordinary mere traffic stop, the police officers were kidnapped and driven to an onion field right outside of Bakersfield, where Ian Chapman was murdered in cold blood and his partner escaped by the skin of his teeth. The movie not only tells that story, but also what it was like for Carl Hediger, the surviving LA police officer, as he had to come to terms with his own belief that he hadn't acted quickly enough to prevent what ultimately happened. PTSD to the extreme. We see his struggle as he attempts to go forward in his own life with this horrible tragedy never far away in the distance. James Woods really kind of steals the show here as Gregory Powell, the murderer, and the person he murders is Ted Danson's Ian Campbell. And as Woods would become famous for a little bit later in his career with some roles in David Cronenberg movies. He can talk extremely fast, and that does occur in this film, where he's trying to explain his plight, the reasons why he did what he did, the circumstances that led he and Jimmy Smith, his partner, to that fateful night. A lot of this movie revolves around the courtroom proceedings, the trial of Powell and Smith, and as you might expect, they bring up terrible childhoods and accusations of abuse, and it's presented as though these two individuals never had a fair shake, and that's why on that evening in 1963, they decided to kidnap two police officers, drive them to the middle of the nowhere, and execute one of them, attempting to execute the other one, who just happened to flee the scene before they could. True crime stories are rarely this fascinating. What with the parties involved, the ramifications that would result from the titular crime, and Joseph Wambaugh, who wrote the nonfiction book based upon the crime, also wrote the screenplay, and his diligent research into the case makes every exchange between characters seem wholly lifelike and realistic. So we had to rank The Onion Field relatively high on the list, as it comes in here at number 6. At number 5, Star 80, the last film ever helmed by the incomparable Bob Fosse. This tale documents the supersonic rise and heartbreaking fall of one-time Playboy playmate Dorothy Stratton. Stratton was born in British Columbia and was a high schooler when Paul Snider caught a glimpse of her as she served him a milkshake at a Dairy Queen. Snider, being the ambitious type, quickly talked her into a move to Los Angeles to audition for the one, the only Hugh Hefner. Dorothy had a real girl next door appeal, and that was exactly what Hefner was looking for. And so pretty quickly upon meeting Hefner, he decided he wanted to use Dorothy Stratton in Playboy magazine. And from there, she received movie auditions and movie roles. One really famous role came in a film directed by Peter Bogdanovich called They All Laughed. But where was Paul during all of this? Paul was hustling. According to some, he created the idea for Chippendales, and he was trying to turn other beautiful women into Dorothy Stratton Part 2, but he was struggling. He previously worked as a pimp and spent time in prison, and when Dorothy's ascent really got going, he was kind of left holding the bag. So after filming the Peter Bogdanovich movie They All Laughed, Stratton and Bogdanovich, the filmmaker, struck up a friendship which blossomed into a romance, and none of this was making Paul very happy. Ultimately, Paul lured Dorothy to their one-time West Side Los Angeles home, where he took her life and then his own. Dorothy Stratton died at the age of 20, right before the world was to become her absolute oyster. Now, in Star 80, Bob Fosse does a tremendous job of interweaving past and present to create an overall unsettling narrative. In the first scene, we see that Paul Snider is armed, that he has kidnapped Dorothy, and things aren't going particularly well. But it's not until the final third of the movie that the murder is actually committed. Using interviews from real and fictional participants to the story, Fosse weaves a scintillating narrative that keeps viewers at the edge of their seats, even if they know what's ultimately coming at the end. And I found it interesting that the production crew actually used the home where Dorothy and Paul lived and where the murder happened as a filming location. That doesn't happen very often in the entertainment industry. And since this was Bob Fosse's last film, I think it's a really terrific swan song to a career that saw him hit the highest of highs with All That Jazz. Eric Roberts is quite good as Paul Snider, and Muriel Hemingway, coming off her success in Woody Allen's Manhattan, is also iridescent and commands the screen every time she's on it. So, star 80, you can do almost no better than to check this one out if you were interested in movies that document actual crimes set in Southern California. Star 80, check it out. Number 4, Jennifer's Body. Now, this isn't a strict retelling of a crime that happened. It is, let's say, loosely inspired by a tragic event. In 1995, Elise Paler, resident of Arroyo Grande, California, which is just outside San Luis Obispo, was lured to a kind of jungle where kids used to hang out, maybe smoke cigarettes, smoke pot, drink a beer, whatnot, with a couple of her friends. While there, Elise was murdered. And she was murdered by members of a burgeoning death metal rock band who saw her slaying as a tribute sacrifice to Satan in exchange for untold riches and success in the music industry. They believed that by killing this poor, innocent 15-year-old, they would then receive their advancement of the quintessential devil's bargain. In 2006, Diablo Cody, one of my favorite writers, took this basic story and used it as a launching pad for a kind of female empowerment version of Night of the Living Dead. So, in the film, Megan Fox is cast in the Elise Paler role, lured out to a sort of jungle by friends of hers who are in a rock band, who kill her as a sacrifice to Satan so that they can go on to enjoy bountiful careers in the music industry. Unfortunately, for the characters in the film, Jennifer wakes up and is now very thirsty for human blood. So, unbeknownst to them, they've created a zombie vampire type. I'm not sure if the parents of Elise Paler or anyone directly impacted by the crime that actually happened in Arroyo Grande were really big fans of the movie, but Diablo Cody, who wrote the screenplay and whose credits include Juno, Tully, and a number of other prominent movie productions, as well as the distinction of being directed by Karen Kusanoff, whose credits include Girl Fight, The Invitation, Aeon Flux, and most recently, Nicole Kidman's Destroyer. The movie is kind of played for laughs. The actual crime is pretty far removed, like the actual impact of the crime is fairly far removed from the story that occurs on screen. There are a lot of things played for laughs. Megan Fox, who, looks like Megan Fox, and all these guys are interested in getting close to her until they realize that she is a bloodthirsty vampire/zombie. Jennifer's Body is that most rare of Hollywood productions that exists both as a comedic satire while also containing genuine elements of horror. So again, even though it's not a one-for-one retelling like some of the other entrants on this particular list, we think Jennifer's Body fits the bill because of the star power associated with the project, the obvious parallel to the crime that inspired it, and the cult classic status the film enjoys to this day. So, Jennifer's Body, but read up on what happened to Elise Paler before you watch it. At number 3, The Entity. The film came out in 1982, starring Barbara Hershey, Ron Silver, and directed by a gentleman who later went on to direct, and I couldn't believe this, the teen soccer comedy Ladybugs with Jonathan Brandis and Rodney Dangerfield. Seems like quite a transition, or if you were being kind, you'd say that this director has remarkable range. In any event, the story chronicles a woman living in what surely must be a haunted house. It takes its cue from the real-life case of Doris Bither, who in 1974 was living at a home on Braddock Drive in, some would say Culver City, I'd say Mar Vista, who began to see spirits inside her house, and not the friendly ones. The spirits or ghosts attacked her violently, assaulted her, and did every horrible thing that you can imagine under the sun to this poor woman. She actually participated in studies with scientists who were trying to figure out exactly what was happening, because the spirits only seemed to come out after Doris Bither had been drinking. And in the end, there was agreement amongst a number of doctors and scientists in related fields that something had been happening. And actually, even after Doris and her 4 children moved out of the home, they still continued experiencing dealings with apparitions in their new property. So sets the stage for this movie, The Entity, which came out roughly 8 years after the events on which the story is based. In the movie, we see Barbara Hershey, who I think is most widely known for her role in Beaches, who made an appearance as Natalie Portman's mom in Black Swan within the last X amount of years. But she is being tortured by these ghosts or apparitions that exist within the walls of her home. And acts of extreme assault are penetrated upon her while her children are watching. No one knows what to do because the characters, the apparitions, are invisible. So when she does seek out help from Ron Silver's Dr. Schneiderman, he's dubious at first, believing this is all the result of trauma that has yet to be dealt with, or pain that has been locked so deeply that it is manifesting itself in this seemingly bizarre form. But later on in the film, the entity, or one of the entities, is actually trapped in a block of ice, allowing the doctor to see, in fact, that it is a real thing. Strangely enough, the entity house still exists. A couple of years ago, my father and I were driving to some of his old haunts, like places where he grew up. And we drove by the place where he went to preschool. And he told me it was on Braddock Drive. And I said, wait, Braddock Drive? I know Braddock Drive. And then he showed me the preschool. And wouldn't you know it, right at the end of that street, that's where the entity house is still located. So the house still stands. And this is a case that has garnered much publicity from across the globe. And in the case of this movie, is truly horrifying. It's not, kind of a jokey Jason wears a hockey mask and carries a chainsaw, or Freddy Krueger has ridiculously long fingers and a gnarly looking face. No. This woman is being physically attacked by beings that she cannot see. And it's very difficult to articulate that to anyone that will listen. And I think this movie does a great job straddling that line between psychological thriller and outright horror movie. And when my father and I drove past that house on Braddock Drive and we saw that a family was absolutely living inside, we both kind of shrugged our shoulders like, well, I hope the entities have moved on. But if you want to catch a movie that's got the feel almost of a documentary, almost a horror movie, a psychological thriller, and it's all based on a real event that happened not too long ago on the west side of Los Angeles, check out The Entity. Our number 2 film on this list is Changeling, a personal favorite of mine. One of the rare examples of a film that only tells you what it's actually about with roughly 45 minutes remaining. In the beginning, Angelina Jolie, playing Christine Collins, a housewife, single mother, living in the Lincoln Heights section of 1920s Los Angeles, bids her son goodbye as he heads off for the movies, and he never comes back. His disappearance garners much ink within the local newspapers of the time until, miracle of miracles, the LAPD inform Miss Collins that they have successfully located Walter. They've got her son, and they're bringing him back via train. And yet, when Christine Collins goes to visit with her son, it's immediately apparent that it's not actually Walter. And to placate the LAPD, she takes the boy home, tries to reckon with the idea that, okay, maybe he changed, some things might be different after this unspeakable ordeal that he must have just gone through. But in the end, it's not her son. And she repeatedly tells everyone that she meets the boy is not her son, that Walter is still very much out there. And for her aggressive pleading, she's actually placed into a psychiatric home for women because they believe she's crazy. And while all this is going on, a young boy comes forward to the Los Angeles police stating that he's been living on a ranch in Wineville where his cousin has been abducting and murdering roughly a dozen young boys. And it's at this point that we realize, yeah, this is a movie about what happened to Walter Collins and Christine Collins and all that, but it's also a story about the Wineville chicken coop murders. For the young boy who ambles in to the police station is the cousin of none other than Gordon Stewart Northcutt, a sadistic, pedophilic murderer who is in the process of fleeing the country back to his native Canada. Walter Collins, as it turns out, was not the only boy who went missing during 1926 to 1928. A number of young boys from all over the Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Inland Empire area had also gone missing. And when Sanford Clark, Gordon Stewart Northcutt's 11-year-old cousin and perceived accomplice, took authorities out to the ranch he shared with his cousin, he helped them dig up multiple bodies. And so the rest of this movie becomes a crime story centered around what happened at that Wineville chicken coop. quickly arrested while trying to flee. Gordon Stewart Northcutt is taken to San Quentin, pleads not guilty at first, until ultimately pleading guilty to murdering 3 young boys. This is one of my favorite movies to show people because the turn when Northcutt comes into the picture is tremendously startling, unpredictable, and almost worthy of its own full-length production. Angelina Jolie, this may be the best performance of her career as a mother simply out to locate her son, to do best by her family, and she is thrown into a massive set of social circumstances involving the Catholic Church and their ongoing battle with the Los Angeles Police Department and the Los Angeles Police Department's attempt to save face in the wake of a number of corruption scandals. There's a lot going on in Changeling. And Clint Eastwood directed this taut true crime thriller with as much style as humanly possible. It's that, again, I'll use the word rare, production that is able to truly shock you. You walk into a movie, you have an idea of what's probably going to come, and then something dramatically changes all of that. The story of the Wineville Chicken Coop murders, the story of Walter Collins, the blend of 1920s Los Angeles politics, religious politics, feminism, it's all on board here and used to dynamic effect. So, that is why we've got Changeling at number 2 on our list. And at number 1, we go with Erin Brockovich, a movie that gave Julia Roberts her statue. She, of course, won the Oscar for Best Performance by a Female Lead for portraying Brockovich. Steven Soderbergh was also nominated for Best Director here. He actually lost to himself for the movie Traffic. The movie was nominated for 5 Academy Awards in total. It grossed well over $120 million and was a certifiable hit. The story tells of the plight of residents from Hinckley, California, which is roughly 140 miles northeast of Los Angeles. Hinckley is not particularly close to any major cities or landmarks, and actually in 2013, the only school within the bounds of Hinckley proper actually closed its doors for good. But in Hinckley, in the early 1990s, a number of residents began getting very sick. Some of them developed cases of cancer, and in others, equally severe maladies. And it turned out it was because of the water. The drinking water was loaded with lethal doses of chromium, courtesy of Pacific Gas and Electric. And it took Erin Brockovich, a woman with no law school background, no real serious academic background. It took her beginning a part-time gig as a legal aid for a law firm to really get the ball rolling on what was happening in Hinckley. Now, ultimately, because of Erin Brockovich, a class action lawsuit was filed on behalf of many Hinckley residents against Pacific Gas and Electric, and a settlement was reached for $350 million. This is the type of story that was built for Hollywood movie making. Julia Roberts was paid $20 million to appear in this film, and I bet when it's all said and done, she would credit this as the role of a lifetime. She's able to be funny, to be sexy, to be as hard-nosed of a journalist as possible, and she genuinely makes a rather sizable impact in the lives of some less fortunate citizens out in Hinckley, California. This movie was nominated for multiple Academy Awards, winning the one by Julia Roberts, and if you ask me, it could have merited a couple more. It's a really, really special movie that audiences from grandparents all the way down to preteens can bond over. A uniquely American story with a first-rate director and an all-time movie star throwing 100 miles an hour. Aaron Brockovich is a revelation. And that's why it taps us out here at number 1 on our list of the 10 best movies made from actual true crime events. So that's going to do it for yet another episode of Living in the Sprawl podcast. A couple things before we go. I want to thank everyone for their continued support and engagement with the podcast. Every time you go to Apple, iTunes, and give us a 5-star rating, that type of stuff helps boost us up the charts, helping us get seen by a larger audience. We invite any and all comments, questions. If you have a topic for something that you'd like to hear covered on the show, please email us. The email address is livinginthesprawlpodcast@gmail.com. Our Instagram handle is livinginthesprawlpodcast. Also wanted to mention our great selection of merchandise. So for all you sprawl heads out there, we have the most gorgeous mugs on planet Earth. They have our nice pink logo embossed across the front of them, and both Lisa and I drink from them every single night. We also have stickers, very, very fashionable stickers that would make for a great addition to anything where you place stickers, be it on school binders, garage doors, cars, refrigerators, mirrors, any place where you can be reminded that you are part of the larger Sprawl family, because we love each and every one of you. We have recorded Patreon episodes. Those are now available. If you want to become a Patreon subscriber, you can do that rather easily by going to the website. The first episode is the 5 best Southern California hamburgers, and the second is the 5 best places to get seafood in Southern California. So for anyone interested in hearing that, and who wouldn't be, I would want to listen to that if I didn't host the show. Those are there available for you now. So again, on behalf of myself, I am your humble correspondent and host. My name is Jon Steinberg. Alongside me, as always, is my lovely and talented producer/fiancée. Her name is Lisa Lowe. We both love you guys so much and want to thank you again for checking us out here at Living in the Sprawl, Southern California's most adventurous podcast. Until next time.